all the time. So sadly, we've gotten pretty good at it. One of the things you can do if the PowerPoint isn't very big on your screen is to click up at the top, and instead of gallery view, you can put speaker view, so you just hear the person speaking. And then you can actually pull that presentation over, so the pictures only take a teeny little bit. So if you're pretty good on your computer, you can make that bigger, and if not, listen to our presentation, and you will be able to get this presentation. Here's how you can capture this for yourself. If you'll open your iPhone and open up your camera. So I've got my camera here, right? And I open up the camera on my iPhone, and if you aim it right at that square up in the corner, that's called a QR code, it will give you the link to this PowerPoint presentation. So everybody learned a new trick.
You are really advanced. I had not seen that. Thank you. That is awesome.
All right, hopefully that is working for everyone. We just kind of want to share a little bit about what to expect in the next 2 hours with us. Again, like Tanya said, we are grateful for the Virginia Board for People with Disabilities for providing the funding for this session. Liz and I, along with our colleague Darren Monarch, we have a grant called the 3 C's Inclusion Project with the Virginia Board for People with Disabilities, and so this is part of that funding. So we're definitely appreciative of them, and we're going to talk a little bit more about what we're doing with them throughout this presentation. If you want the actual link, again, here on the top of the screen, this goes to the presentation. The other thing we're going to have you do, you can see another QR code, and just sometime today, whether you do it in a little bit or right now, as we're kind of getting set up, there is a kind of a sign in. We want to know who's here. We want to know who you are. And again, because of this is funded through a grant, we have to report some demographics like who's here, your gender, your race, that kind of information. So if at some point in time you will go to that release form, if you don't do it now, we have it at the end of the presentation too. So we would greatly appreciate that. Kind of our plan is just to go through kind of who's here and do some brief introductions. And then we're going to dive into our discussion on advocacy and how you all can advocate for inclusion in your different roles that you all have. And the whole purpose of this is to share with you guys. You guys are all going to walk away with 3 different presentations. You're going to walk away with a 10-minute, a 5-minute, and a 3-minute presentation that you could use to give to others. So that's kind of the purpose of our session today. And at the end, we're going to kind of give you guys a charge of who you might possibly present to. And so that's kind of our plan for today. Just so you're aware, I know a lot of people have joined our session, but we're really focusing in, and we're going to ask all of you at the end to give a presentation or two to a school board, to a principal, to an agency that supports you. So if by chance you're like, oh, this session might not be for me, just kind of think about that. And we're definitely glad you're here, but if by chance you're not sure that this session is appropriate, you know, you're not going to hurt our feelings for leaving. Those of you that are teachers, you guys will learn how to advocate within your schools. If you're a school administrator, you will learn to advocate with your faculty. But this presentation is really geared towards self-advocates and parents that want to advocate for their students with disabilities within the school system. Liz, did you want to add anything else to that?
I am good. Somebody asked if we could put the link to the form, and I just put it in the chat. So I did want to add this. I wanted to say that this, as Karen said, this presentation is really assuming that you're already very passionate about inclusive education. So if inclusive education is something that's new to you, we are happy to answer questions, but we might be going a little fast because we are assuming you already know about inclusion and are passionate about it.
So, all right, so I think everybody has the presentation that I'm going through right now and the form. And the importance of that form, I just want to reiterate, we're asking for your email and your mailing address because we will actually send you guys a flash drive with these 3 presentations, the 3, 5, and 10-minute one that I spoke about. We're also going to send you this lovely inclusion practices guide that Liz and Darren created for the Virginia Department of Education. So, you know, we're not going to use anything or do anything with your personal information, but I wanted to let you know that we will mail these to you as soon as you fill out that form and agree to give those presentations. So that's why we're asking for that information, just so you know. So let's get started and tell you a little bit about our 3 C's inclusion project. So our 3 C's stand for culture, collaboration, and coaching. Those are what we're saying make up and enhance inclusive practices. When we are able to enhance our school culture and our community's culture related to supporting individuals with disabilities and all forms of diversity, not just individuals with disabilities, even though that's our primary focus, but we really want to focus in on the culture and the acceptance within our schools and our communities. We're looking at collaboration. That's a huge part. Our teachers, our parents, our students, the administrators all have to collaborate together. So we've provided strategies, and we're going to share with you guys some ideas of what to do in the future. And then the coaching part is a little bit more of what we're doing in another section of this grant, is coaching some teachers within some schools of how to promote inclusion and be more inclusive with their practices, whether it's academically, socially, or just making sure that the students are getting the services they need in these inclusive general education classrooms. So that's kind of the foundation of our project. And just to kind of show you the differences is our project is kind of 2-pronged. The first pronged is working with 2 school divisions within Virginia. Within these schools, we have created inclusion teams at each school, and those inclusion teams came up with an inclusion action plan. What were their specific team and school going to focus in on throughout the school year? And then we wanted to implement these plans, and so we trained the coaches to provide that support. So that's one piece, but the piece that we're doing today with you all is that we're actually presenting at 4 different regional conferences, and the ARC is one of them. Some of you might have seen us at the Greater Richmond Down Syndrome Association. We presented there. And then in a couple weeks, we're actually going to present with PTSI. And then we're going to host a conference down here at Radford in Southwest Virginia. But those are our 4 regional conferences. And within these conferences, we want to train families and self-advocates how to advocate for inclusion and to move forward within their school, because every school and every student's kind of in a different place. And so we want to look at this, and not only for those of you that are parents, not only advocating for your child, but for all children within that school, and really trying to make changes within your school that support all students, not just your own child, even though I know you're really invested to what's best for your own child. So we're going to share with you some materials that we've created and going to share with you to help you make those changes and to share information with your schools. Liz?
Yeah, someone asked over in the chat what school divisions we were working with, and I think that's okay for us to share because they're very proud to be working with us. When we wrote this grant with Virginia Board for People with Disabilities, there were two criteria that we really had to look at. And one was, are these school divisions that are documented as actually having very poor results, academic results with students with disabilities, poor discipline rates? I mean, they were admittedly, their statistics were pretty poor for students with disabilities and is in much need of improvement. And in addition, we looked at school divisions that were not meeting the state minimum for including students with disabilities in the school day. We also had to look at school divisions that, in addition to all these other factors, were battling poverty. So we ended up choosing two school divisions really to serve as models, to say if these two school divisions can do it, so can you. So one is Pulaski County, which is in the New River Valley, one of our neighboring school divisions. And the other one is Waynesboro City Schools, a very diverse little school division. So those are the two divisions that we're working with right now because we have this great Virginia Board of People with Disabilities funding. You know, Karen and I are professors, and that is our job. And inclusion is our passion. And so we are actually looking for funding to work with other school divisions. So that's just an aside.
Thank you, Liz. So just kind of real quick, I'm gonna stop sharing for a moment just to kind of see from a raise of hands, and I know seeing everybody on the screen, we have quite a few pages of you all, which is great, but I just kind of want to see who is here today. And if you don't mind, just kind of a raise of the hand, and I'm going to kind of quickly go through the slides just to give us an idea of who is here.
Yeah, share you can share your camera right now, and if you don't want to show your camera, there's a place at the bottom of your screen that says reactions, and you can raise your hand there also. So yeah. Go ahead, Karen.
Go ahead. Yeah, thank you. Arc of Alliance threw up their hand there. So definitely utilize Zoom and all the features that they have. It's actually a pretty cool program if this is your first time using it. So my first question for you, let's start off with, who are the self-advocates here today? Self-advocates.
I'm one of them.
Yes, we have quite a few. Yay, awesome, thank you. All right, how about, who are my parents? Parents of individuals with disabilities. Terrific, thank you guys. And what about, who are my teachers? How about we start with special educators? Do we have any special educators? A couple, terrific. And then any general educators? General educators. How about any professionals in the field? Service providers, any other speech language pathologists, therapists? Terrific, we have a nice variety.
Ask administrators?
And administrators too, yes. Who's administrators?
Right.
Hey, Josh.
Terrific. And many of you play many roles, which is awesome too. So very exciting. Did I leave anybody out? Did anybody not get to raise their hand?
Me.
And some people are putting it in the chat. Thank you so much.
Perfect. Yeah, that's great that you guys are sharing who you are. We appreciate that. How about just another quick question, since you guys are great at raising your hand and using these Zoom features. Who is from Northern Virginia? Who are my Northern Virginia folks?
Charles Clark, Northern Virginia, member of the Ark of Northern Virginia, and liaison officer.
Okay, thank you. And then who are my coastal Virginia Beach, down there along the coast, a couple people, terrific. How about Central Virginia, Richmond area? Lots of you guys, terrific.
I have to make a comment. What's interesting is there's actually 3 pages of pictures.
Yeah.
So there's a little arrow and you scroll through. So everybody is on page 1. We're seeing you. And then page 2, we've got a few people who've got their selfies up, which is great. And same thing for page 3. So I had to laugh.
Yeah.
When
Only
you
people
say
want to show us who they really are.
when you say the Richmond area, are you referring to just the Richmond area, or is New Kent is New Kent included in the eastern area, or is New Kent considered the Richmond area?
You're kind of right there in the middle, but so I don't know.
Everybody in the New Kent area, raise your hand.
Anybody else with Candace in the New Kent area?
All right.
Nice, thank you. And then how about the Shenandoah Valley along the mountain area? Okay, terrific. And then last but not least, how about Southwest? Who's down here with Liz and I? Anybody?
Brad Powers.
Brad.
And somebody else, I saw somebody else raise their hand.
Okay, a couple of you are down our way. And then did I not include maybe just South Virginia? Anybody? Just
South side.
South side?
I did.
Great.
Terrific. Well, welcome you guys. I know given time, we're not going to be able to do introductions of everybody because we have so many people with us today, which is exciting, but we're going to do a little bit more. Okay, I'm going to stretch you guys to do a little bit more technology for me. Can you go to this pollev.com, Karen Douglas 890, and we're going to put that in the chat box. Liz, can you grab it for me?
Yep.
Thank you. We're going to put in the chat box, and you guys, there are a few questions to answer.
Okay.
Ooh.
And again, just to get to know who you guys are, because the first question is where do you or the person you are advocating for fall on the inclusion continuum? So is that person, or are you yourself, are you fully included? Are you partially included? Are you not included at all? You or the student child you're advocating for. So Liz, have you been successful? You need me to do it? Yes?
I put it in the chat. Oh, you know what happened? I'm sorry. It got sent to Jamie for some reason. All right, how about everybody in the meeting?
There you go.
Okay.
Now, if you go to this, let me show you what it's going to look like. It looks like one person is already starting. Up here at the top of my screen is the website again. If you're having trouble.
Can you share your screen?
Can you not see it?
Are you sharing the
Oh,
PowerPoint?
sorry, I forgot to share my screen. You guys are right, I'm just talking away, and there we go.
Feels good.
pollev.com/Karen Douglas 890. All right, more people are logging in. Awesome. Awesome, awesome.
I'm nervous about it.
It's funny, it's not showing us the question, so.
It will in just a second.
Oh, okay, all right.
There.
Mine's on.
Happening live in front of us. That is really
Here's our first question.
See, this is how we have to teach. So we've gotten pretty good at this.
I bet.
Glad to see that you guys are at least most of you are fully or partially included. Not too many in the no inclusion, but we know it happens, and that's why we're here today. And thanks, if you're not able to get it work, you're definitely welcome to share in the chat box. Thank you, Karen, Ben, and Elizabeth. Give you just a second to keep going. Let's see. So this first slide just kind of shows me how many people are accessing the survey. I know it takes.
Oh, you're good.
So while people are working on this, because we know it takes a little bit of technology, one of the things that that we know in Virginia, when it comes to inclusive education, I would say that many people feel that this is the ideal. And you're here because you're passionate. You believe that people with disabilities need to be fully included in our schools, in our communities, in our workplaces. But the reality is, it's interesting, as the percentages are changing here, you will see that it's still very much a goal. You know, the motto of the ARC is a life like yours, meaning we all get to lead regular lives. And you know, we're looking here at only about a quarter people are really experiencing inclusion in all aspects of their lives. In particular, we're looking at school-based inclusion. I know a number of you are young adults and maybe not so young adults. And we are hoping that you will become advocates for inclusion, because most likely you might not have been fully included when you were a student 5 years ago or 10 years ago or more.
And the other thing just to think about with inclusion too, that we're finding when we work with our school districts, so especially those of you that are advocating, especially the teachers and the administrators here with us today, you know, it's not just the students in your school, but are there students that should be in your school that aren't, that might be going to other schools within your district, or maybe privately funded schools? So that's another thing to think about, is are students going to their neighborhood school and being involved within that placement? So if you're unsure of that, it's a question that you might ask and find out to make sure that everybody that should be there is there. So I think you guys are making some great progress, and you guys can keep going, but it looks like a little over half of people are partially included, and then with some fully included and no inclusion. So thank you guys for sharing that, and we'll keep it open so you can keep seeing this. And then the next question was, because we're talking about presentations, we want to know what your presentation experience is. And wow, over half of you have spoken to more than 10 people. Some of you talked to a small group, and then some of you just haven't had opportunities yet. But I know when you do, and after today, you're going to be excited to get to share a presentation.
Wow.
Yeah. So great results there. And at any time too, while we're not going to specifically share like how to present everything, we're not going to have time to do that today. If when we meet with you later, please feel free to reach out to Liz and I about just like, hey, how do I calm my nerves during a presentation? And how do I make sure I cover what I need to cover? in the amount of time that I have. We'll talk a little bit more about that individually. If you need, you know, that 27% of you that haven't ever given a presentation, we can support you also. So even though we won't quite have time to do it today. My last question for you is, what is your advocacy for inclusion experience? And you guys, wow, over half of you have made a public presentation. That is awesome, very exciting. And then many of you have talked to at least a principal or someone within the school. And then some of you, again, haven't had the opportunity, but you will. So what great results. Thank you guys for sharing all of that. And I hope you like this poll everywhere. It is a free program, so anybody can create an account and use it within their own presentation. So please do feel free to do that. And let me go back to mine. And I think you guys can see this. We already did that. So now we're going to just dive into what is inclusion. Take it over, Liz.
Okay, so we're actually going to talk a little bit about advocacy for a minute, because what we are learning as we are trying to develop this, how to help people advocate for inclusion, is that many family members in particular have successfully advocated for their own child to be included. And those of you who are principals and teachers and service providers in this group, you were probably part of that effort as well, advocating for a particular child to either be included for the first time or to be included in greater ways. You know, one of the things that we know when we talk about partially included is that for years, students with disabilities have been included at lunchtime and in specials, music, art, but have not been included during academic instruction. And so what we found, I mean, I want you to look, by the way, I have gray hair. This is silver hair, okay? And I first started being involved in inclusive education in 1982. And that is almost 40 years ago now, that many people in the field have been advocating for inclusive education. So when we had the opportunity to go after this funding, we said to ourselves, what we really need to do, we really need grassroots advocacy at this point that is for the big picture of inclusion. So whereas many of you have spoken for yourselves or for your child on behalf of inclusion, really glad to hear some people talking about that they were in inclusive education. What we need now is for you to speak up and speak out to really try to get school divisions to change. Can you change that slide, Karen? Thank you. And so what we're looking for is a grassroots effort on behalf of all students with disabilities. And our big push is really, so here's the thing. When school divisions have to report, and you'll see this in the presentations later, but when school divisions have to report what percentage of their students with disabilities are being included across the school day, that's a report that has to be done every year. And it has to be reported to the state, and it's actually part of the state's report to the federal government to show that they are complying with the Individuals with Education Act, which guides special education. Yes, I agree. We're talking about this also. So I'm looking at Ben's comment. And so there are about half of the school divisions in Virginia that are meeting the minimum requirement, and that is to include 65% of all students with disabilities for 80% or more of the school day. And usually when we say 80%, that has to be more than just lunch and specials. That includes academics. So that's Virginia's goal. 65% of students with disabilities will be included for 80% or more of the school day. What we know is that is mostly students with more complex disabilities, students with intellectual disabilities and autism and multiple disabilities who are still in self-contained classrooms, even private settings. We have hundreds of private schools across Virginia for students with autism, for example. So we're here today to say that we need you to help advocate for a division-wide commitment to inclusive education. Can you switch the slide? There we go. So just a few do's and don'ts. Many of you know this, but one of the biggest things we're going to be asking you to do is, while you always want to share your story or the story of your child, many people have told us here on the side about, I was in inclusive education for 10 years or 13 years. We have a lot of great stories, and Tanya, I'm hoping we'll be able to save the chat.
Yeah.
But, and I know George personally, so I know George has his own stories of inclusive education and how that worked for him. But what you want to do when you're, George, what you want to do is advocate. You're focusing on not just yourself or your child. You know, you are really going to be focusing on what you're asking the school division to do. And so we're going to help you with some of these pieces. So you want to always be prepared. And we've prepared a 3-minute, a 5-minute, and a 10-minute presentation to help you advocate. We'll be going through those. And we, these are just your usual do's and don'ts, okay? You know not to complain, you know not to be confrontational. Whenever possible, you have to praise the baby steps. But we are, if we're really going to move forward after 40 years of trying to make the point that inclusive education is the right thing to do, we're going to need lots and lots of people across Virginia to be going to their school divisions and saying, hey, we need you to make more of a commitment. Okay, thanks. How are we doing on time? All right. I don't know why that's blank. Let's go to the, there we go. Okay. So many of you have had, you've said you've had experience with advocacy. And so for many of you, you've advocated in IEP meetings, or even in some of you who are working with very young children in early intervention meetings, parent-teacher conferences. Those are the kinds of places where you've advocated for yourself or for your own child. What we're looking for now is not only that you're advocating for inclusion for your child or yourself in those kinds of meetings, but also the bigger picture that we're presenting to community service boards, to your special ed advisory committee. I serve on the school board in Radford City Schools, and I can tell you that anybody can come talk to us. We have a 5-minute talk time, and anybody can sign up and talk to us. And you know what? Hardly anyone ever does, except when they want to complain about something. And so they're all great times when you can sign up to talk. PTA meetings, and maybe presenting at a faculty meeting of your school. All of these are places where you can advocate. So here's our charge to you, okay? We're going to help you. We're going to assist you. We're going to help. If you feel like you can promise to make 2 presentations, then we will help you do some planning. Who do you want to present to? And maybe even practice a little bit, okay? We've created, yes, Charles?
I like to make a presentation at schools that people with mental disabilities.
Absolutely. All disabilities, okay? That would be great. And what we've done is is actually, a year ago at the art conference that was in Harrisonburg, we got a lot of great feedback from families and advocates who attended. We kind of created these sample PowerPoints, and not only did folks help us at that conference, but also Amanda Raymond from Pizzi has been an incredible help in helping us really look at these presentations that in essence we're going to hand over to you. And as we said, here are some of the places you can deliver those presentations to.
All right.
So first, yeah, go on. Karen's going to go. First, we're going to model for you a 10-minute presentation. And before Karen does that, let's talk for a minute about a 10-minute presentation, believe it or not, is pretty long. Like I said, school board meeting, you get 5 minutes. Some other kinds of meetings, they give you 3 minutes during the public comment period. A 10-minute presentation is going to be when you've asked your school board if you may make a presentation and they're willing to give you 10 minutes, or at your special ed advisory committee meeting, or maybe at a PTA meeting. And we're starting with the longer one because we think it can help bring out all the issues that you want to discuss. Go, Karen.
All right, so like Liz says, this is our 10-minute presentation, and I just kind of want to show you that you have the slide, but then down at the bottom of the screen, you can see our comments, and we kind of put in a few comments of what you might say when you are presenting. So I just kind of wanted to share that with you, and that's why I'm not going to be in presenter mode right now, because I just wanted you to be able to see what's down at the bottom of the screen. And even if it's small, when you do get these presentations, you'll be able to see it, and you'll be able to edit it based on you and who you're presenting to. But this is really just kind of the starting foundation, and you can take it and make some revisions if necessary, and we'll kind of point out where you may or may not want to make those changes. You're going to start off, and of course, always, share who you are and where you live and why you're here today, but you just wanted to share the importance of inclusion within the school and for all of our children, youth, and adults within our community. We want to kind of start off with and share, when you are presenting to your audience, the 3 big questions. This is what we really want your audience members to be thinking about: is what is inclusive education? Why is it important for your school? And why do we need to take action now? So we've been talking about inclusion, for the last 45 minutes together, and we wanted to share, what are we talking about? And some of you have been chatting about this, of it's not just physically being there. Yes, it's nice for students to be in a general education classroom, but we want them actively involved and actively learning academic skills, and then also working on their social skills and building relationships with their peers in the classroom. That's a huge piece, along with learning and improving their academic skills also. And that requires a lot. It requires a lot of the general education teacher, the special education teacher, and then all the students within the classroom. And that's where that community and the culture of the classroom and the school is really important. So we kind of wanted to just grab the audience attention with these 3 questions, and we're going to talk about each one of them in more detail.
Just an aside, as we'll do some point counterpoint, but the way we've tried to structure this is knowing some of the pitfalls that happen when people are presenting. So if you're going to do a presentation for a group, they really want to know, what the heck is this person going to be talking about? And so that's why we put this right up front, so they know whoever your audience is, here's the 3 big questions.
Yeah. And along with these 3 big questions, our next slide is just, what is special education? Because a lot of people don't really know what it is. They've heard the term, but they're just not necessarily sure. And so we have found that sharing what special education is important to start off with. And the whole purpose of special education and receiving special education services is so that individual receives specially designed instruction. It's not just being included, it's not just getting special support, but it's getting specially designed instruction where they are accessing the general curriculum and they are receiving those same educational standards as all the children within their class, within their grade level, within their school. But oftentimes we have to make sure that they're not only getting their accommodations, but they're getting the specially designed instruction is why students are identified with needing special education services. And this should be at no cost to the parents. This is something that comes with IDEA. In meeting the needs of individuals with disabilities. But the key here is ideally, it's not on this slide, the next slide I'll talk to you about the least restrictive environment in receiving the specially designed instruction.
Just to do my little counterpoint here, again, I told you that I serve on school board and I deal with a lot of school board members across Virginia. They really don't know what special education is. And so that's why we felt that it's really important to put some of the most basic things here. First, they have to know what special education is before they can understand why it should be delivered inclusively.
So once we talk about special education, then we dive into that inclusive education. And we really like the graphic here of our three circles or 3 bubbles there. Thank you, Candace, for the thumbs up on that one. But yeah, it's physical, it's academic, and it's social access and inclusion within that environment. And it should be that all students are capable and competent of learning. We want to have that presumed and believe in that presumed competence, and knowing that all students can learn, no matter what our ability level is, or no matter what our strengths and our weaknesses are, we can all learn. It's just that we need certain supports to help us learn. So we have to believe that we're all capable and competent of learning. It's full participation in the general education setting throughout the day, you know, for academics, for elective classes, for lunch, for PE, for recess. Ideally, it's for all of that. And then it requires that access, belonging, and high quality teaching. We can't just, you know, I think it was Ben that said something about just putting students in the classroom. It's not that. It is, they need to learn academic skills when they're in those environments and those general education classes too. And so we need high quality teaching. We need differentiated instruction. We need to utilize universal design for learning in those settings. And oftentimes we have to provide professional development for teachers, for administrators to really learn how to fully support students within their classroom.
We had one hand that was raised and a question that's in here. So that question, how do you deal with students that appear to not be able to handle inclusive education due to overstimulation, is a big question to answer, okay? And what we're looking for is for divisions to understand that, in fact, we have lots and lots of methodologies to help students, because the reality is life is overstimulating. Good grief, have we not all learned that these past 5 months? And so we can't just throw incredible stimulation at kids. We actually have to have a team that's going to sit down and talk about what kind of sensory calming breaks are we going to put in place, and what kind of social stories are we going to write, and how are we going to visit the setting in advance so there's no surprises. The reality is, my silver hair here, 40 years of research and practice. There are no questions we can't answer if we work together. The problem is that we have a lot of divisions and people still in those divisions who just really don't believe kids with disabilities should be receiving academics in inclusive settings. So we kind of have to start when you're going to be doing a presentation and you're going to get a school board member goes, well, what about the kids who can't handle overstimulation? You're going to have to say, you know what? That is for the IEP team to work on. What we're asking for is a philosophical commitment. We're asking for a commitment of practice that all students are capable of learning. Students need high quality teaching and services. Inclusion is not dumping kids into the classroom. It is really having a whole team effort to figure out how can we make this successful.
And that's where, like Liz was saying, the broad discussion is so important, but then eventually it is the IEP's team discussion of what are those individual supports to help this student? How is it going to help me be successful in those environments? And that's the continuation of, okay, as a school district, let's include these students and know that they belong and should be there. And then as an IEP team and as smaller teams within the school, let's figure out how to make it work for Johnny that is overstimulated in the classroom. Excuse me. So with that being said, inclusive education, then kind of gearing your presentation into that least restrictive environment, letting them know that that least restrictive environment are those general education classrooms. And then we do have this continuum. And while ideally we want our students to be included most of the day, there might be some time where they might need to go to a separate special classroom for a little bit. But then just showing that continuum all the way through special schools, home instruction, hospitalization if necessary, but letting them know that we're going to start with that least restrictive environment. And let's figure out how can we support that student in that setting. And then if we need to fade back a little bit, maybe, but let's start there and let's try everything we know of to make it successful. And with that being said, going into and sharing with your audience the best practice recommendation for inclusive education for all students with disabilities is that 90% of students with IEPs should have the general education classroom as their primary placement. And then
so we're going to say this, okay, this is best practice. We told you right now, Virginia's goal is 65%. That's a big difference.
Yeah, and also from a great book by Villa and Thousand, they talk about how 80% of students with IEPs should be receiving their core academic instruction within the general education classroom with special education support through co-planning and co-teaching. Charles, is that you with your hand raised? Do you have a question? You want to unmute? Can you hit the unmute button down there at the left-hand corner?
It's not working.
There you go,
Yeah.
Charles. We can hear you now. What's your question?
People with mental disabilities should be educated.
Yep, to be educated?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have a disability myself.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
So again, we want to share with our audience that this is best practice and this is where the goal should be for the school system because we're not there. Like Liz said, we're below the average of 65% within the state of Virginia, whereas that best practice is up at 90%.
I want you to just point point a quote to you at the bottom under one of the sample comments we give you, and many of you will have all things to add, okay? But note that we've sort of timed this. So as you add to this, if you give this presentation, you're gonna have to practice and write out your comments, because if people give you 10 minutes, that's all they're gonna give you. But I don't know if you've ever had the chance to see Norman Koontz. He is truly one of my heroes. I've seen him many times. I don't think he's spoken publicly in Virginia for some time, but he's a self-advocate and disability rights activist. And here's how he defines inclusion. It is the valuing of diversity within the human community. When inclusive education is fully embraced, we abandon the idea that children have to become normal to contribute to the world. That's a pretty powerful quote to add to your presentation.
Yeah. So we also set up the presentation with some myths that we kind of want to debunk, because these are oftentimes, like what Liz was saying, these are what your audience is thinking. They're thinking special education is a place. And so we want to share with them, and you can kind of see with this graphic here, this picture graphic, it's not a place. It is the supports and services that students with IEPs or what they receive through their IEPs. They get those accommodations, they get related services, they might get behavior support plans if necessary. It's a collaborative process. So letting the audience know that it's not about a place, it's not about a classroom, it's not about a certain area in your school, a certain hallway. It is all about supports and services for our students. And it's oftentimes a misconception. And a lot of people, when they think special education, they think a room. They think this place instead of what's best for their services. And I want to add to this and challenge you guys, for people that are, if you're in your school district, if you're placed because, oh, you have autism, you're in this classroom, or you have an intellectual disability, you are going to be placed in Karen Douglas's classroom. You have a learning.
We know this is how it does work in many places in Virginia.
We do, and we have to get away from that, you guys. We have to. We have to talk about, well, what supports and services does this individual need in order to be successful in the general education classroom, in that least restrictive environment. So that's an important point and something to think about for those of you in your classrooms and within your school divisions. Liz?
I noticed some questions on the side. People wanted to know how to make their screen bigger, okay? Take your mouse and go up on the screen and go to where the edge of the presentation is, and you'll see this double-sided arrow come up. Once you see that double-sided arrow come up, you can drag the presentation to the right-hand side, and it will make that be the biggest picture and make the pictures be really little. Okay.
Hopefully that will help, yes. So along with that, special education is a service, a support. Disability, like I said, should not be dictated by placement. We should be providing those supports that UDL, Universal Design for Learning, differentiated instruction, and then those co-teaching models should be implemented within that general education classroom. And when we talk about those co-teaching models, we are talking about, getting teachers to parallel teach, to do station teaching, to do alternative teaching. It's not about, and occasionally you can do one teach, one assist, or one teach, one observe, but hopefully we're using those other models in addition to occasionally when that one teach, one observe, or assist is needed. But just getting people to think about not a place, but a service and a support is so important. Myth number 2, inclusion is only for students with milder disabilities. Oftentimes we think that inclusion is for a student with a learning disability, a student who is high functioning oftentimes, And it's not. It's for everybody, no matter what their disability is or what their label is. It should be for everybody. And I don't think we have time today, Liz, to show this, but we provide you with the YouTube link to Damien. And he is an awesome kid, and he is a great example of how inclusion works. So if you have time, if you have a 10-minute presentation, you're not going to have time to show this. I think it's a 4-minute video if my memory is correct. So just kind of think about that, but you could share it with their audience in case they want to go check it out.
I think the reason why this is so important, this particular piece, is if you go in, you already know this is a division. Oh, we can think of some of them. Some of these bigger divisions that they're doing a pretty good job with their students with milder disabilities. And they truly believe that students with more significant disabilities are really, they truly believe that students with significant disabilities really can't be included and they're better served in self-contained settings. This video shows a student with significant and multiple disabilities being included in kindergarten or first grade. And one of the things a number of us are doing in Virginia is trying to find videos of students with more significant disabilities being included in academic instruction in early elementary, later elementary, middle, and high school. So also make sure to email us if you have found some really great videos, because we're trying to compile those.
Yeah, or if you can create the videos, if you know of students, we would love for you to be able to get in there and record those videos and share them with us, because it is possible and it is very successful when other students are within those environments. And not only students with significant disabilities, but also when we're talking about students with behavioral issues too. That's a big piece, and oftentimes that's a lot of pushback with students that might have some more severe behavior problems. But again, it's about meeting the needs of that student and how can we make it work within that classroom. And so that's where we want to share and talk about, okay, how can we support this student? This student, you know, maybe he might need to wear his headphones to block out some noise in the classroom. Maybe he sits off to the side so he's not quite close to everybody. But he's still there, he's still actively participating, he's still doing the same work as everybody else. But we need to find ways to work with all students within the general education classroom. We definitely want to advocate for pushing in those supports and services within the general education classroom. Student needs PT. They should be receiving that PT within the general education classroom, whether there's some downtime, whether it is, you know, finding when is that appropriate time to be doing their stretches. If a student receives occupational therapy, you know, they should be coming in when it's writing time, when it's computer time and they're typing. So being able to integrate those services, speech should be coming in during reading, during a discussion time. It should be push-in as opposed to pulling out the student, where we know oftentimes those services don't generalize back to the classroom. So this basically, our classrooms need to change. And we as educators need to really work with, you know, Liz and I as professors are teaching our future teachers and some of our current teachers, like grad students, but we really need to think about how can we change our classrooms to meet the needs of all individuals. And these things we can implement to make our classrooms stronger. One of our key points down there at the bottom of the slide talks about one-on-one aids. Our paraprofessionals are lovely people. We need paraprofessionals. They are a great support, but we need to make sure they are supporting the student and not hindering their education or their social involvement. We know that, you know, if any adult is standing right next to a student, other students aren't going to come talk to them. You know, nobody wants to talk with the adult present, to where, okay, let's stand. Yes, the student might need support, but let's stand further away until that student needs support, and then we can come provide support, but we don't have to be sitting right next to them all day long. So letting them know that, you know, our aides, our paraprofessionals are providing support to our student, but they don't have to be right next to the student 24/7. And there are lots of strategies and lots of ways to build those peer relationships and utilize peer mentors. Those paraprofessionals can build those relationships, and those are long-lasting relationships as opposed to teachers. You know, we get to know our teachers and they come and go yearly or every few years. Those peers are going to be in their life, hopefully for a lifetime. And so that's what's definitely important for us to consider and to think about. Myth number 3, moving right along, inclusion hinders the academic progress of students without disabilities. This is another myth, and you guys can share this lovely research with your audience members. It doesn't hinder their academic progress. It actually helps students. The academics of students without disabilities in inclusive settings was better than students in non-inclusive settings. The other cool things are that we've had higher attendance rates for all students with or without disabilities. And we've also had higher test scores in math and reading specifically, but I suspect in the other subject areas too. Fewer absences, and then less disruptive behavior. That's another big piece of students being in these inclusive classrooms. It helps both students with and without disabilities in the long run. It doesn't hinder them. And so there's always been, in most of the research shows, it's either a positive effect or no difference for those students without disabilities.
And let's just think about why that is. When you have a classroom that you're creating a classroom climate where everyone truly is welcome, then any students who are experiencing challenges or may have differences that make them feel not welcome in school, that's going to change the dynamics for them. Where you're using universal design for learning, and there's co-teaching and co-planning, and there's differentiation. All of that is really solid instruction that's going to help all students. And there was one question I'm going to say we just aren't going to be able to answer it today. How do we do inclusive education right now? I will acknowledge that right now we're really worried that we're going to have some serious setbacks regarding inclusive education. But let us go ahead and finish. Notice how this turned out to be a lot longer than a 10-minute presentation, but a lot can stem from this PowerPoint presentation that we will share with you if you're ready to be an advocate with us.
Yeah. And I'm kind of adding a few more points in there and discussing things a little longer than what you would be discussing if you were sharing this with your school board, with a principal, just to kind of give you guys a little bit more background and information. So yes, inclusion benefits all students within the classroom. Another myth, and oftentimes this comes from parents, is that my child with a significant disability won't be accepted by their peers and will be bullied. This is a concern, yes, it is possible, but that's where it is so important for us to create and help enhance that inclusive school culture and really build the acceptance of all individuals, no matter what our differences and no matter what our abilities are. Is really creating that culture within the school, and that comes from the staff having that belief. And so those of you that work within a school, or if you're a school administrator, you might want to do some team building within your staff and some disability awareness within your staff to help start that school culture, and then have it trickle down to be inclusive for all of your students. Think about your school mission statement, or the school mission statement for your school. Does it include inclusion? Does it talk about it? When you walk in the door, do you see representations of a variety of individuals? When we do celebrations, are we celebrating a variety of individuals, not just the A students, but the students that have made the most progress? The students to where we can build on their strengths and their abilities, because we're not all A students, and we still need to be celebrated in some form or fashion. Selecting the books we read within our classrooms, you know, are they helping build that inclusive school culture? So that's where our students with more severe and more significant disabilities, you know, getting them to be accepted. And for me personally, I've seen, you know, usually kids are more accepting than adults are, especially those young kids. And so if they've been included since elementary school, let's keep going, middle and high school too. Even when the academic skills are getting harder, they have been included and should continue to be included there with their peers. So we do have some resources and ideas for how to build a school culture and enhance a school culture if you're interested in specifically learning more about that. Myth number 5, our last myth, is that inclusive education, this is a big one, is more expensive than segregated, separate setting special education. And this is a point that many people will make. And it does require money, but oftentimes we can just reallocate the money that schools are provided in order to provide this high quality education. And so the cost, it's not necessarily more, it's just that we need to reallocate the money that is there for additional teacher training, so these inclusive practices can be effective and useful, but it doesn't necessarily require more money. So this is a big point and a big takeaway. You know, thinking transportation. It's cheaper transportation-wise for students to attend their neighborhood school than to go to a different school. So those are a few things to kind of think about. Liz, you want to take over the why inclusion piece?
I would certainly like to take over why inclusion. So I especially want to respond to this given a number of the comments I'm seeing on the side. I think another reason why inclusive education it's taking a long time is that it's really a culture shift. When we talked about the 3 C's earlier, it's truly a culture shift. So it's really a larger vision for schools and educational services that supports the academic and the social and emotional and behavioral success of all students. And you know, our schools are becoming very, very complex now, very complex. One of the things that that divisions are particularly worried about is that as kids come back to school after not being in school settings, for some kids it'll be months and months on end, there are many students whose families, for whatever reason, have not been able to support their education at home. Families who are experiencing school food insecurity and even housing insecurity, and families within which there's tremendous dysfunction. And the reality is, my long-term hope is that this is actually going to make schools change in ways that they hadn't changed before. That we have to have the kind of culture that says we are going to support the academic and social and emotional success of all students. And as you can see, what you want to sell to the people you're talking to is that there's higher academic achievement for everyone, better educational outcomes for everyone, in particular, increased access to the curriculum for students with disabilities, good inclusive education, with good supports actually decreases challenging behaviors. There are many students with disabilities that are in highly restrictive, highly behavioral programs that have a very high level of behavior that others find challenging. And with good supports, many of those behaviors disappear when that student ends up in a setting where they have more choice, have friends, have more movement, and have more meaningful, good instruction that's happening for them. So all of these things we have to be able to talk about are the benefits of inclusive education when we're trying to sell it to others. The other thing well, we're going to talk about this now. Here's one of the biggest selling points when you're talking to those school divisions that really all they see is the dollar signs in front of their head, in front of their eyes. And they also see the numbers that they have to report to the state, okay? Here's what we know statewide, that the majority of students with disabilities, and this isn't just students with more significant disabilities, this is all disabilities, are not even achieving basic competencies in core academics. Less than half of students with disabilities statewide are meeting academic standards in English, in writing, in math. About half are meeting in science, and a tiny little bit more than half in social studies. So when you start looking at the success of students with disabilities and the success of special education, the point of special education is to have highly positive outcomes for students with disabilities, that they're living in their community, they're having a life like yours, basically, that they're living in the community, that they have employment, that they have friends. And I hate to say this because I've been a special educator for, let's see, more than 40 years. Special education has failed students with disabilities. You don't want to necessarily say that, but it's true. Special education has not had the kind of success that we wanted to have. Go ahead. School divisions, school boards, for example, what you want to be able to do, and we'll teach you to do, is to pull the statistics for your school division, because many school divisions have much lower passing rates for students with disabilities. Yes.
Liz, let's pause for just a second. Jamie Carter had a question. Jamie, do you want to unmute and share your question? Are you there, Jamie? Jamie Carter?
All right. We'll make sure to, it's 3:17. We'll make sure to save some time for questions. Oh, there's Jamie.
You never taste this. What do you think this is?
Hello.
Bite into it. It's lemon, right? Yeah.
Jamie, did you have a question? All right, I think we will come back to Jamie.
I think one of the things that we know we're preaching to the choir here. We know many of you have had very poor experiences with schools, or less than positive experiences with school, or maybe you had some inclusion when you were going to school, and I'm getting some head nods, and now you're a young adult and you're sitting at home. And what we want is for you to go out there and tell your story and push inclusive education for students with disabilities. So this is part of the presentation. I'm going to go to the next slide. This is continuing to kind of hammer away when you're talking, in particular, when you're talking to school boards and state special ed, and your special ed advisory committees. We know that 10% of all students with disabilities across Virginia are included, less than 40%. Statewide, about 5% are in a completely separate school for students with disabilities with absolutely no opportunities to interact with peers. And again, if you look at your individual schools, some school divisions have as many 12% of their students with disabilities are in separate schools for students with disabilities. Now, here's the thing, when we look at has special education worked? Only 59% of students with disabilities have graduated with a standard diploma. And that really tells you that the way we do things now is currently not working. Go ahead, Karen.
And Liz, did you share that at the bottom are the links? You want to talk about those?
So, so what you'll want to do, and we can help you, what you'll want to do is look at how does your division measure up. So these are the state averages. And if you use that link below, the last time they were able to gather, 2018, 2019, I think we should be able to now get, we'll have to look at that, the 2018, 2019 performance figures. But we won't have anything for the 2019-2020 school year because no statistics were gathered because schools closed and, as you know, all heck broke loose. But what you'll want to do when you're making that local presentation is to really have those figures about what is your school division doing. All right, so did we skip something?
No, you.
Oh, okay. All right, why now? Go ahead. I can't control the screen, so I have to have Karen control the screen. All right, so moving forward, here's what you're going, this is what we call your ask, okay? When you come into a public meeting, you basically want to ask people to do something, to make a commitment, to take some next steps. So what you're asking is, you want them to make a division commitment to increase the number of students included in our general ed classrooms for 80% or more of the school day. If you currently have a division that's that's only including 65% and they're all students with mild disabilities, then you can't overnight ask them to be including 80% of all kids. But you can ask them to make a commitment to do better. One of the things that we have learned, and this is the 3 C's in essence, is that in order to do better, schools need to make a commitment to creating a framework for inclusion and developing division-wide and individual school action plans that really focus on creating a culture of inclusion that enhances collaboration between special ed and general ed, and that really builds that capacity for inclusive practice. We know we have a lot of teachers out there who say, I'd like to do better at this, but I don't know how. And so we need to have professional development. We have lots of experts out there. It's not a question of the information that's not there. It's how to make that match once a school has set a goal. So these are your 2 asks. You're really asking a school division to make a greater commitment to inclusive practice and to actually create a framework for inclusion and have some action plans that say, here's how we're going to do better.
And so kind of last but not least, we just wanted to share that Pete did help us create these PowerPoint slides, and they kind of reviewed our presentation for us. So we just wanted to kind of give a shout out to them with this presentation. And with this, so this is kind of the end of our 10-minute presentation. And I know we discussed it for longer than 10 minutes, but if you went through it step by step and had your points written out clearly, exactly what you're going to say, you could get it down to 10 minutes. But we wanted to share with you kind of the differences between that 10, 5, and 3 minute. And we might not have time to show you the differences, but like The 5-minute doesn't include the myths. We just kind of included everything else. We took away the myths and just kind of consolidated the presentation. And then the 3 minutes in the video. And then the 3 minutes is short and sweet of just a few slides to just really get at that inclusive education piece. Thinking about the when and the where you might give some of those presentations. Liz, did you want to share a little bit more about when they might do the 5 and the 3 instead?
Right. So, and I'm looking at some of these comments and people are really saying, oh my gosh, we really need to talk to our school boards. I would also say that maybe one of the very first places that you want to present is your SEAC, and that is your Special Ed Advisory Committee. Every school division has a special ed advisory committee that is supposed to be composed of parents and should have a representative student with a disability. Often there will be some special educators, but primarily it should be those people who have a vested interest in how special education is working. And many families have said to us that they think that that might be a place to present. And a 10-minute presentation would probably be good. A lot of SEACs are looking for programs. But sometimes you need to use that 3-minute presentation first. So even for your SEAC, or even for maybe it's the executive committee of your PTA, if you could do the 3-minute presentation, which sort of said, I'd like to give a presentation, here's what it's going to be about, and my ask is that you give me 10 minutes for a presentation, that is would be a good place to start. So that 3-minute presentation is for when you basically want to just do some awareness and you want to ask for the next step to happen. So a 3-minute presentation can be school board. It could be to your principal. It could be to any place where you get to have a chance to speak during a public comment period. You might speak, somebody is saying you might speak to student organizations. I think a lot of student organizations at high schools that are centered around equity would be very interested in this. Okay, I think that's probably.
Okay. Well, why don't we open it up for a few questions of what specifically can we help assist you with, and if just to kind of help manage that, if you kind of just visually raise your hand, or if you use again one of those reactions, we can see your hand raised, or you can throw your question in the chat box and hopefully we can address that also.
I have one I'm gonna speak to right here. You know, it's funny the way mine is set up. Oh, you know what? I'll make this smaller. Maybe I'll be able to see.
And I can actually stop sharing.
Sometimes I can't see who it's from. Why can't I?
Do you?
Jamie, I think it's Jamie. That question is, there are many self-advocate leaders who are ready to take on segregation in public schools. Where would you suggest that they present? They might not have a family member in the school system, but they face the same segregation and discrimination that's going on today. I think the very first place to start is to speak up during the public comment period of your school board meeting. At every school board meeting, they have a required public comment time. School boards are having to do that differently now. They might have online signups, but in most schools, they give you 3 minutes, and some school divisions give you 5 minutes. And so that might be where you introduce yourself as a person who did not experience inclusive education and were segregated, and use that 3-minute presentation to basically make your ask that the school board look at the issue of inclusive education. That's I think, one first start. Did you want to add to that, Karen?
No, I completely agree as far as probably the best place to start, especially if you don't have a child in the school district. I would think that that would be a great place to start. Thank you. Great question.
There were some questions about, is it better to start at elementary school rather than high school? So this is really issue. That's what we've been doing for years, because everybody says, oh, and Charlotte, we're gonna take your question next. We've been trying inclusive education at elementary level, and we get some success, and then students go to middle school and it all falls apart. I do think that part of this is why we're trying to approach it a different way, is that we do have to be looking at a school division's commitment. Because if it's just a single school's commitment, then there has not been the training in place that needs to be put in place for teachers, and there may not be the supports in place.
And the other thing is you're back to square one when you do go to that next school. You know, if you fight for inclusion and you get it in elementary school, but now you have to start all over again in middle school. Whereas if you approach it from the district level and making district level changes, then it's going to be easier to transition for those schools. So we'll go to Charlotte and then Candace. Go ahead, Charlotte. You want to unmute?
I
I
have a question too.
wanted to say that, say a few things. One, when you were going over the barrier to inclusive education, you forgot to mention that there are some people out there who live in poverty that can't access inclusive education. And then there's also the fact that people from the marginalized minority base, as well as people with disabilities, are being funneled through a pipeline called the school to prison pipeline. And I also want to mention that when I was transferring from middle school to high school, my high school's MR program director wanted me to join that program, but I fought against that with mom as my support, and that changed her mind and let me try out a general education curriculum. And look at me now. I'm at George Mason University taking sociology classes. I'm also a certified medical assistant. I've been in a lot of honor societies and dean's lists and things like that.
You are amazing, Charlotte. But you are the kind of person who does need to go into the school division and say, look at how the course of my life changed because of inclusive education. Absolutely. You know, your comment about poverty, I think that all kids who come to school should have the opportunity and the right to inclusive education. Where poverty comes to play is that oftentimes the parents of those children have so many other pressing concerns like food and security and housing that they can't take time off in the middle of the day to go to an IEP meeting to advocate on their child's behalf. And that, I think, has been the problem with doing this student by student approach. You were included, Charlotte, but were all students with intellectual disabilities included at your school? No. All right, we had lots of other questions. Karen, were you keeping track?
Candace, I think I called on next. Then we'll do Kim, and then we'll do Charles.
Right.
So my question is this: in Northern Virginia, what's the percentage of schools in your area that have done this and had success? And also, do you have a model that schools can follow that has worked in the Northern Virginia area that we can bounce back on?
So, I bet she's on this call too. Are you familiar with the Arlington Inclusion Task Force?
No, ma'am.
Okay, so Arlington has been fierce. The Arlington Inclusion Task Force, I don't know if Ton is on the call. Tana Saminsky is the contact person. But they have been very fierce in advocating for inclusion. And again, sort of on a case-by-case basis, have had a number of students included that would not have been included in the past. It is, in hindsight, when we did the 3 Cs project, we chose a rural school division and an urban school division, but we didn't choose places that were 5 hours away from us, and also that were large behemoths, like many of the divisions in Northern Virginia. I think it is going to take a real concerted effort to try and have an impact on some of those very, very large school divisions that, I'll be honest with you, the high schools are larger than all of Bradford City Schools, for example.
Good questions, Candace. Kim, we'll go to you. Kim, you want to unmute? Thank you.
I just wanted to ask, as a parent whose child is 30 now, and we worked really hard for inclusion, as he was going through school, when you go to a school board meeting, how do you ask for accountability? Like, after you've given your presentation, how do you follow up to see that they've at least moved in some direction philosophically, to include students with disabilities?
First of all, I think that your first buy-in needs to be your SEAC, your Special Advisory Committee. So your Special Advisory Committee is tasked with that follow-up. And they will make sure that quarterly they get a report, for example. There is strength in numbers, and other folks have, there are other advocacy groups in your area. I do think that's what you start with is an advocacy group so that it's not just you presenting to your school board. You're kind of presenting on behalf of a group also.
Thank you.
All right, and then we'll go Charles, and then Chris Mitchell, and then Reed.
I think we need more special education being up to par over the state should be at least 100% people with disabilities. It should be, because something's wrong if it's not.
Yes.
You don't have good enough teachers. You need more special ed teachers.
And you're right, Charles, and we are working on that. And the more that you guys can help us recruit for special educators, that's an important point.
And I'm a liaison officer for the Alliance in Northern Virginia, also a communications officer. So I'm going to communicate to other people.
Terrific. Thank you, Charles. Great resource. Chris Mitchell, you want to go?
Yeah. I remember what it's like me being a special ed during my childhood days in my hometown of San Marcos, the Valley Discovery, California. I was very good being a special ed during my 13 years of schooling in this town I grew up. I remember seeing the people with special ed in my current home base, Hampton Roads, Virginia, especially Williamsburg.
In Williamsburg, yeah. Did you think they were doing a better job in California or in Williamsburg?
Yes, it'd be both.
Okay.
Okay. Very good. Thank you, Chris. I think it said Reed. You're up next.
I could talk about this all day. Could I discuss with you and Elizabeth, Karen, Elizabeth, like afterwards today or some other time through email or Zoom or some sort of chat?
Yeah, we can definitely set up a meeting. If, I'm going to share in just a second our email addresses, and we got yours, so we can email you and we can set up another time. And again, that's open invitation for anybody here today. Please do reach out. And I do want to share with you, before we answer more questions, which we will get to the other questions if you guys are thinking. Here is kind of our plan. We want you to think about where you are going to present and where you're interested and what type of presentation you're interested in giving. But in a couple of weeks, we're going to email you and set up a follow-up meeting. And these might be some smaller groups, some similarities amongst yourselves. And we're going to talk about a little bit more about these advocacy presentations with you, and just, you know, whatever specific questions you may have that you want us to answer.
Excuse me, is that my email address?
In the future. And we are getting, and here's a form that I think many of you completed at the beginning. We'll put it in the chat box again, just to make sure that you do provide to us your email, so we can reach out to you in the future. Also on this slide is our emails, so you can reach out to us at any time. Dr. Altieri just put that in there, and I will put this meeting, not the meeting, the form. Oh, where did it go? There it is. In case you didn't get it at the beginning of our presentation. Again, if you provide your email and your mailing address, we will share these presentations with you, and then you can make changes based on where you plan on giving your presentation. So if you complete this form, we'll get your email and we'll reach out to you, and definitely we'll set up a time to meet with you. We definitely appreciate that.
Excuse me, you send that to my email?
What'd you say, Charles?
We send that to my email. You have my email address.
We will send it to your email, yeah.
Right, thank you.
Yes, I think I filled out the form. I'm not sure. I was about to press submit when an alarm went off on my phone, and
okay.
I had to undo that. And when I was done with that, the form disappeared. So I basically finished it, but I wasn't able to submit it because something popped up on my phone. I had to deal with that.
Okay, Reed, we'll be able to, and we'll reach out to you, and I'm sure the ARC has information too if we need it. But yeah, we will touch base with you.
Okay, that'd be great. Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions or any resources that would be beneficial for you? Anything else that those of you thinking about these presentations are interested in? Elizabeth.
Can I say something?
Grace?
Grace,
Yeah.
and then we'll go to Elizabeth.
You,
Go ahead,
you
Grace.
want me to go first? Or Elizabeth? You want me to go first or Elizabeth? Okay.
You can go first, Grace.
I was just gonna say, I am 30 now, but when I was in high school, I did both classes. I did special ed, and I did regular classes too. So I did both.
Okay.
I did both.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I was gonna tell you that I put my email in the chat. I don't know if you saw that or not.
hopefully when we get this saved, we'll be able to, because there was lots of great stuff in the chat, you know, and it goes so fast. So hopefully Tanya is helping us figure that out.
Yeah,
Okay.
we'll save that.
I just want to make sure you got my email. That's all.
Yeah, thank you, Grace. Elizabeth, I think you had your hand raised.
Yes. Hi.
Hi,
I see you, Karen and Elizabeth. I was with you in Richmond, and
I remember.
happy to see you guys again. You know me, full of all inclusive. Yeah, and Janella, my daughter, who is in general ed, she's starting in kindergarten. And something that I found out that is not all general ed teachers. I actually qualify to teach kids with special needs. So thank God when Janella wanted to, get into kindergarten, her first teacher, she didn't know much about it. But because they put two kids in the same, actually they do more with the special needs and the same class, they have to remove Janella to another class, and the second teacher that she had, he was also didn't know anything about it, but was more willing to learn about Janella. Her condition was Down syndrome.
Elizabeth, I don't want to interrupt you, but
and
your
he
signal is
was-
so bad we can't
She
understand what
went
you're saying.
to seminars, conferences.
Yeah, the little bit I'm able to catch Elizabeth
and
sounds
was
great.
so happy to learn. And
We
she
want to
was
be able to hear it, but yeah, it's really choppy and hard to understand.
She wants them to be the best.
And look how it's continuing, even though she's
I know.
muted already. That is wild.
And everything. So I found
If you want to put in the chat box a little bit of that, or we can chat again later,
We'll call
Elizabeth.
you.
Yeah, we'll reach out. We'll give it just a second to finish. I've never seen this happen before. See, there it goes. Okay. Goodness. All right, Liz, anything else that you wanted to share before we get to more questions?
No, I noticed Brittany's had her hand up for a while.
Okay.
Hello.
Hi, Brittany.
Hi, Brittany.
My name is Brittany, and I represent the Four Seasons and the Life Like Yours Alliance Group. Now, I think you guys need a support group in the school system. I'm going to tell you why. Because when I was in middle school, I didn't get a chance to walk across the stage or march at my graduation. Now, my mother took control of being the advocate for me. I kind of wish I could have took control, but she did it all. But that really hurt me. I will never see that again.
Right.
Well, hopefully, Brittany, you can reach others and share that importance of individuals advocating while they're in school, even though you might not have had the chance and you're your family did it. Hopefully you can share with others. I mean, that's a great message of starting to advocate at a young age. So thank you for sharing that, and we hope you'll share that with others so they will be confident and willing to share, whereas maybe you didn't have that opportunity when you were younger. So thank you.
You're welcome.
All right.
Some of you all who've attended today, there's been a lot of questions, and I've been thinking about maybe we still have some time left, like till December. Maybe we could host another thing for self-advocates, trying to figure out how self-advocates might work with middle schoolers and high schoolers. Yeah, we'll
That
just.
would be great.
Question for you.
Several
That'd be
people
great.
in the Self-Advocacy Alliance, that's a statewide group. So I'm sure that the chairs, you've got several chairs on this call
Yeah, I
today,
think
would be
that's good.
happy to connect you.
That'd be great.
And we would be happy to host.
Yes. Thank you. I just put in the chat box one more time the form to fill out so we can reach you. We don't want to miss anybody. I know the ARC has a little bit of a list, but we just want to make sure that we can reach you guys. It looks like about half of you have completed the form. If we can get the other half, and I know you might not be able to do it right now, but if you can take that link and get ready, it won't take you but a second to fill that in. Again, so we can mail you the Inclusive Practices Guide, and also we'll send you a flash drive with the PowerPoints on it, but then we can also email those out to you also. We have just a couple minutes left. We have definitely appreciated reaching out to all of you today, and we hope you have found it beneficial. You know, this is definitely a passion for Liz and I, and we appreciate your support. And we can't do it, just the two, or with Darren too, the three of us. We need you guys advocating within your schools across the state. And we definitely appreciate that, of you taking that initiative and seeing the importance of it for, again, all students, not just the ones that are our family members or we're friends with, but the importance that, you know, we have to start at that school division level. So we definitely appreciate that. And we look forward to working with you. Like I said, with your email, we're going to reach out to you. Like Liz said, we can maybe pull together the self-advocates and have a special session for you guys. But for those of you that are parents, educators, professionals in the field, we can also meet with you, and we definitely appreciate your support, and we look forward to working with you as we move forward. Final questions, comments, thoughts in our last couple minutes together.
Candace, I don't know who's had their arm up longer, Candace or Charlotte. Final word here.
That's right.
So I guess my question to both of you is, do you have a model that your schools have followed to do this inclusion that has worked? And if so, could you send us that model so that we don't have to, like my mom always says, you don't need to recreate the wheel if there's a program that's already, or if there's a model that's already worked for you guys?
You know, there's tons of resources. You know, what's kind of worked for our schools is that they have been able to work with us and brainstorm together about, oh, what professional development do you need? So we're working on, one of our goals for Virginia Board of People with Disabilities is that we are working on kind of a resource page where a lot of this information would be available, videos and sample inclusion action plans and those kinds of things.
And basically kind of a step-by-step guide for school divisions, Candace. So, so we're trying to incorporate what we've done so far with Waynesboro and Pulaski County. And so that would be, I think that's the resource that you're talking about, and that's the model that we're getting ready to share. We're not quite ready to share it yet, but when we do, we will provide that for you. And
at Virginia Department of Education, I know we're running out of time, at Virginia Department of Education's website, if you search inclusion or inclusive education, they have a page now devoted to inclusive education. Hooray, that's fantastic, right? And they have the guide to inclusive education for K-12 that we're going to send to you. They have a guide to preschool inclusion that's on that page. They have a lot of samples of co-teaching and how co-teachers work together to support inclusive education. They have some videos that were made. For example, I hope she doesn't mind I say this, Allison Thurman, whose son is in Hanover County Schools. They did some what inclusion looks like for her son at that school. So if you'll go to that webpage, you will find some beginning resources.
And unfortunately, Elizabeth was the one with the bad connection there, but she did type about how the need for more professional development for general education teachers. And I think you're right, Elizabeth, and that can be one of the steps and one of the asks when we go to the school board of talking about, hey, let's gear some of our professional development time for general educators and special educators to work together and to talk about inclusion and what that looks like in their classroom. So that's something that you can definitely incorporate within your presentation, and is an area of need, we know, across the whole state.
Can I say something? I belong to an inclusion team, and I'll bring that up in the next meeting to go around these other schools and school boards to get things rolling. But you education, everybody.
Yep. Thanks, Charles.
Welcome.
All right, Charlotte.
Charlotte will be in touch
Yes.
with you.
And to close out, I would like to give you a good resource. I had the privilege of having Dr. Scott Braybrand, who is now the school superintendent for Fairfax County of Northern Virginia, as my Fairfax High School principal. And I think it would be really great if we got him included in discussions about inclusive education.
Definitely. Thank you.
Well, it's a lot of, oh, go ahead, Karen, I'm sorry.
Yep, go ahead, Tanya.
Close out, Tanya.
I was just going to say there are clearly a lot of voices and a lot of very passionate voices here to do the work that needs to be done. It takes everyone, and Liz and Karen, I can't thank you enough for what you've provided. These tools, these resources are going to empower everybody here to go and advocate to make this change. So thank you, thank you. We very much appreciate it. And everyone else, and I've saved the chat and all of those things, so I will definitely share that with both of you. Everyone else, I hope to see you at the mini sessions to come the rest of this week, but thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thanks,
Thank you.
everyone.
Thank
Lily,
Bye.
Charlotte, Karen, thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you all for attending. We greatly appreciate
Please.
it.
I got a question.
Hello, Brittany.
Yes, Reed.
What's Karen and you and Elizabeth's email again?
Can I put it in the chat box for you?
That'd be great. And also, there was a session that was right before this one around lunchtime I missed out on, and it was on the printed out sheet. I missed out basically on all of it. Who would I talk to about getting at least a recap of that?
Tanya.
All the sessions will be within about 24 hours. All sessions are recorded, and they'll move on the convention website from live to on demand, so that you're able to catch anything that you missed. Okay?
That'd be great.
We'll, after the 2 weeks, will will they still be like available to watch if we are not able to watch them within the 2 weeks, or are they going to go away, or how are you guys going to archive them?
Well, we'll have them. The intention was just to keep it up and public and keep that convention site public for registrants for the couple of weeks so that you have time to go grab anything you want, download. But if you don't have time to get to something, you can certainly let us know and we'll make sure you get it.
All right. Thanks.
All right. Well, thank you, everybody. Have a good day. See you soon.
Bye-bye.
See you soon.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.